Hello, my name is Jeremy Walters. At my grandfather's will reading, I watched my three cousins celebrate as the lawyer announced they'd be splitting $41 million between them. Champagne popped, designer suits straightened with pride. Then the lawyer turned to me and slid a thin white envelope across the mahogany table. My cousin Bryce smirked and said, "Hope there's at least a gift card in there." The room erupted in laughter. I should have walked out right then. But when the lawyer mentioned a name I hadn't heard in 20 years, a man in Monaco, everything went silent. My aunt's face drained of color. Bryce stopped laughing. And suddenly, that envelope felt heavier than all their millions combined. Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell me what time you're watching this, because what happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about family, loyalty, and the secrets the wealthy bury overseas. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I hadn't been to the Thornfield estate in 15 years. The place sat on the edge of Lake Pembroke, surrounded by iron gates and old money that smelled like mahogany and judgment. My grandfather, Vincent Thornfield, built his empire from shipping and real estate, turning a single cargo vessel into a fleet that moved goods across 3 continents. By the time I was born, the family name carried weight in rooms I'd never be invited into. Pulling up that winding driveway felt surreal. Oak trees lined both sides, their branches forming a tunnel that seemed to swallow sunlight. I parked my decade-old sedan behind a row of luxury cars, a Bentley, 2 Mercedes, a Porsche. My cousin Bryce's car had vanity plates that read, "Heir Apparent." Subtle as a sledgehammer, that one. The door opened before I could knock. A woman in a crisp black suit greeted me with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. She gestured toward the east wing without a word. I followed the sound of voices, expensive laughter, the kind that comes easy when you've never worried about rent. The drawing room was exactly as I remembered it. Vaulted ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, paintings worth more than most people's houses. My 3 cousins were already seated. Bryce, the eldest at 38, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. Spoiler alert, he thought he did. Beside him sat Cooper, 35, quieter but just as calculating. He adjusted his cufflinks every few seconds, a nervous tick that betrayed the confidence he tried to project. And then there was Kendall, 32, the only woman among them, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued. My aunt Victoria Thornfield sat near the fireplace, draped in black silk that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She was Vincent's daughter, the executor of his estate, and the person who made it very clear over the years that I wasn't quite family. Not really. My mother had been Vincent's daughter from his first marriage, the one he didn't talk about at cocktail parties. She passed when I was 12. After that, I became the inconvenient reminder of a chapter the Thornfields wanted closed. "Jeremy," Victoria said, her voice smooth as aged whiskey, "so glad you could make it." The way she said it made it sound like I'd had a choice. I took a seat in the back row, away from the inner circle. A lawyer I didn't recognize stood at the front of the room, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a briefcase that looked older than me. His name was Edmund Carver, and he'd been the family's attorney for 30 years. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carver began, clearing his throat, "we are gathered here today for the reading of the last will and testament of Vincent Harold Thornfield." The room settled into silence. Even the lake outside seemed to stop rippling. Carver opened a leather portfolio and began reading. "To my daughter, Victoria Thornfield, I leave the Thornfield estate and all properties therein, along with controlling interest in Thornfield Maritime Holdings." Victoria nodded, as if she'd already known. She probably had. "To my grandchildren, Bryce, Cooper, and Kendall Thornfield, I leave the sum of $41 million to be divided equally among the 3 of them, along with board seats on the Thornfield Foundation." The room erupted, not in surprise, but in celebration. Bryce stood up and shook Cooper's hand like they just won the lottery. Kendall smiled, the kind of smile that could cut glass. Someone popped a bottle of champagne in the adjacent room. I heard the cork hit the ceiling. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, waiting for my name. It had to come, right? Carver continued. "And to Jeremy Walters, grandson of Vincent Thornfield through his late daughter, I leave the following:
The room went quiet again. Every eye turned toward me. Carver reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single white envelope. He walked across the room and placed it in my hands. It was thin, almost weightless. I turned it over. No writing on the outside, just a wax seal with Vincent's initials pressed into crimson. "That's it?" Bryce said, barely containing his laughter. "An envelope?" Kendall leaned over the Cooper and whispered something. They both snickered. "Maybe there's a gift card inside. Starbucks, maybe? $20? The room erupted in laughter. Even Victoria smirked, though she tried to hide it behind her hand. I stared at the envelope, my face burning. I wanted to leave. I wanted to stand up, walk out, and never look back. But something kept me in that chair. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the faint hope that this wasn't the punchline it appeared to be. Carver cleared his throat again. "There is one additional note." The laughter died down. Vincent included a sealed letter to be read aloud only if Jeremy Walters was present. Victoria sat up straighter. "What letter?" Carver pulled out a second envelope, this one larger, and broke the seal. He unfolded the paper inside and began to read. "If Jeremy is hearing this, then the envelope has been delivered. Inside, he will find instructions that will lead him to a man in Monaco. This man holds the key to something I could not entrust to anyone else. Jeremy, you have 72 hours from the time you open that envelope to make contact. Do not let them interfere. Do not let them follow. This is for you alone." Silence. The kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Victoria stood up slowly. "Monaco? What is this, some kind of scavenger hunt?" Carver folded the letter. "That's all it says." Bryce's smirk faded. "Who's the man in Monaco?" "The letter doesn't specify," Carver replied. Kendall leaned forward. "This is absurd. He's sending Jeremy on some wild goose chase while you get $41 million? I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. I stood up, envelope in hand. "I think I've heard enough." Victoria stepped forward. "Jeremy, if there's something in Monaco that pertains to this family's assets, then I guess Grandpa wanted me to handle it," I said, cutting her off. I walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Bryce mutter, "Unbelievable." Carver called after me. "Mr. Walters, I'd advise you to open that envelope in private." I didn't turn around. I just kept walking. Outside, the air felt cooler. The sun was setting over Lake Pembroke, casting long shadows across the driveway. I stood there for a moment, staring at the envelope in my hands. It felt heavier now. Not physically, but in the way that unspoken things always do. I got into my car, tossed the envelope onto the passenger seat, and started the engine. As I drove down that tree-lined driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Victoria stood on the front steps, arms crossed, watching me leave. She looked like someone who just lost a game she didn't know she was playing. I didn't open the envelope that night. I drove back to my apartment in the city, a modest one-bedroom place in a neighborhood that didn't make the tourist guides. I set the envelope on my kitchen table and stared at it while I made coffee. Then, I stared at it while I didn't drink the coffee. 72 hours. A man in Monaco. Instructions. What had Vincent left me? And more importantly, why? I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my cousins' faces, heard their laughter echoing in that drawing room. The envelope sat on my nightstand, untouched, like a riddle I wasn't ready to solve. By dawn, I gave up on sleep entirely. I made a pot of coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and finally broke the wax seal. Inside was a single piece of paper folded twice. The handwriting was unmistakably Vincent's, Neat block letters written in fountain pen ink that had faded slightly with time. "Jeremy," it began. "If you're reading this, then you've already endured their mockery. I'm sorry for that, but it was necessary. They needed to believe you received nothing of value. In truth, you've received everything." I read that line 3 times. "In this envelope, you'll find a phone number and an address in Monaco. The number belongs to a man named Pascal Dubois. He's expecting your call, but only within 72 hours of this letter being read. He will give you access to something I've kept hidden for 30 years, something that will change your understanding of who I was and what this family truly is." My heart started pounding. Do not tell Victoria. Do not tell your cousins. They've spent their lives believing they were entitled to my empire. Let them keep believing it for now. You'll understand why soon enough. Trust Pascal. Trust yourself. And Jeremy, whatever you do, don't let them follow you to Monaco. The letter was signed simply, Vincent. Beneath the letter was a business card. Cream-colored, expensive paper, embossed lettering. It read, Pascal Dubois, Private Wealth Management, Monte Carlo. A phone number was printed at the bottom with a Monaco country code. I sat back in my chair, mind racing. Private Wealth Management, Monaco. Something hidden for 30 years. What had Vincent been involved in? I pulled out my phone and stared at the number. It was 6 in the morning here, which meant it was noon in Monaco. Reasonable time to call. My finger hovered over the screen. What if this was nothing? What if Pascal Dubois didn't exist? What if Vincent had lost his mind in his final years and this was some elaborate joke? But Vincent wasn't the joking type. He was calculated, deliberate. Every move he made had a purpose. I dialed the number. It rang twice before someone picked up. Oui, allô? Is this Pascal Dubois? I asked. Speaking. And you must be Jeremy Walters. I blinked. How did you... Your grandfather told me you'd call within 72 hours of the will reading. You're right on schedule. I've been waiting for this call for 3 years. 3 years? That's when Vincent first contacted me about you. He was very specific about the timeline, about the conditions. He wanted to make sure you were ready. Ready for what? Pascal chuckled softly. That's not a conversation for the phone, Jeremy. When can you be in Monaco?
I glanced around my apartment. My job as a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized shipping company wasn't exactly demanding, but taking off to Europe on a moment's notice wasn't simple either. I'd need a few days to arrange things, I said. You have 72 hours, Pascal reminded me gently. After that, the instructions your grandfather left become void. The clock started the moment that letter was read. My stomach tightened. What happens if I don't make it in time? Then what Vincent left for you will be distributed according to a secondary clause in his will, a clause that benefits your aunt and cousins. Of course it did. I'll be there, I said. Excellent. I'll text you the address of my office. Come directly there when you arrive. And Jeremy, one more thing. Yes? Come alone. Your grandfather was very clear about that. The line went dead. I sat there for a long moment, phone still pressed to my ear, heart hammering in my chest. Then I opened my laptop and booked the next available flight to Nice, France. From there, I could take a train to Monaco. The flight left in 18 hours. I called my boss and told him I had a family emergency. It wasn't technically a lie. Then I threw some clothes into a duffel bag, grabbed my passport, and tried to ignore the knot of anxiety twisting in my gut. Monaco, Pascal Dubois, something hidden for 30 years. I was about to step into a world I didn't understand, chasing answers to questions I hadn't known to ask. But as I zipped up my bag and glanced at Vincent's letter one more time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The flight to Nice was long and restless.
I couldn't stop turning Vincent's words over in my mind. You've received everything. What did that mean? Money? Property? Information? I landed in Nice just after dawn, caught the train to Monaco, and arrived at Monte Carlo by mid-morning. The city was exactly what I had imagined. Gleaming yachts in the harbor, luxury cars lining every street, buildings that looked like they'd been carved from marble and ambition. Pascal's office was located in a discreet building near the Casino de Monte Carlo. No flashy signage, just a bronze plaque beside the door that read, Dubois and Associates, Private Client Services. I pressed the buzzer. A moment later, the door clicked open. Inside, the lobby was all dark wood and soft lighting. A receptionist with perfect posture greeted me in French, then switched seamlessly to English when I responded. Mr. Walters, Mr. Dubois is expecting you. 4th floor, suite 12. I took the elevator up, my reflection staring back at me from the polished brass walls. I looked tired, nervous, out of place. The elevator doors opened directly into a private office. And there, standing beside a wall of windows overlooking the Mediterranean, was Pascal Dubois. He was older than I had expected, maybe late 60s, with silver hair swept back and a tailored navy suit that fit like it had been painted on. His eyes were sharp, assessing, but not unkind. "Jeremy," he said, crossing the room with an extended hand, "welcome to Monaco." We shook hands. His grip was firm, confident. "I appreciate you coming on such short notice," he continued, gesturing toward a pair of leather chairs near the window. "Please, sit. Can I offer you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine," I said, though my mouth was dry. "I just want to know why I'm here." Pascal smiled, the kind of smile that suggested he'd been expecting that response. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. "Your grandfather and I worked together for over 30 years. He trusted very few people with his private affairs, but I was one of them. What I'm about to show you has been kept in this office under strict legal protection since the day he delivered it." He opened the folder and slid a photograph across the desk. It was old, faded at the edges. The image showed a younger Vincent, maybe in his 40s, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. She was beautiful, dark-haired, smiling at the camera like she just heard the best joke of her life. Behind them was a small boat, docked at a harbor. The name on the boat's hull read, Celeste. "Who is she?" I asked. "Her name was Isabelle Laurent," Pascal said quietly. "She was your grandfather's first love." I stared at the photo. I don't understand. My grandmother?" "Your grandmother, Eleanor, was Vincent's second wife," Pascal said gently. "Isabelle came before her, long before." I turned the photo over. On the back, in Vincent's handwriting, was a date. June 1971, Monaco. Vincent met Isabelle here, in Monaco, when he was 23. She was a painter, passionate about art and life in ways that terrified and thrilled him. They were together for 3 years. "What happened?" Pascal's expression darkened. "Vincent's father happened. His family had expectations, arrangements. Vincent was supposed to marry within a certain circle, secure alliances that would benefit the family business. Isabelle didn't fit that plan. So Vincent made a choice. He left her." I looked down at the photo again, at the way Vincent's hand rested on Isabelle's shoulder, at the way she leaned into him. "He regretted it for the rest of his life," Pascal said. "He built an empire, married Eleanor, had children, became everything his father wanted him to be. But he never stopped thinking about Isabelle." "Why are you telling me this?" Pascal reached into the folder again and pulled out a letter, yellowed with age. He handed it to me. "Because this is the last letter Isabelle ever wrote to him, and it's the reason you're here." My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. The paper was delicate, fragile. The handwriting was elegant, slanted, written in English but with a faint French cadence to the phrasing. "My dearest Vincent," it began, "I know you've moved on, and I don't blame you. You were always meant for bigger things than a life with me. But I wanted you to know that you left me with the greatest gift I could have asked for. Her name is Sophie, and she has your eyes." I stopped breathing. "Vincent had a daughter," Pascal said quietly. "One he never knew about until years later, when Isabelle finally tracked him down. By then, Sophie was 15. Isabelle had raised her alone, never asking Vincent for anything. But she thought he deserved to know." I looked up at Pascal. "Where is she now, Sophie?" Pascal's face softened. "Isabelle passed away in 1995. Sophie was 23. Vincent supported her financially after that, quietly, through me. He set up a trust, made sure she was taken care of, but he never told his family. He couldn't. The scandal would have destroyed everything he'd built." "And Sophie?" "Sophie lives here, in Monaco. She's 53 now. She's an artist, like her mother. And Jeremy, she's your aunt." The room tilted. I gripped the arms of my chair, trying to process what I was hearing. "Vincent wanted you to meet her," Pascal said. "He wanted you to know that there is more to this family than what you saw in the drawing room. More than money and estates and board seats. He wanted you to understand where you came from, who you came from." I stared at the photograph again, at Vincent and Isabelle frozen in a moment of happiness that had been stolen from them. "Why me?" I whispered. "Why not tell Victoria or the others?" Pascal leaned back in his chair. "Because you're the only one who would care. The only one who would see this as more than a complication to be managed. Vincent told me you reminded him of himself before the world hardened him, before he chose duty over love." I felt something crack open inside my chest. Pascal stood and walked to the window. "Sophie is expecting you tomorrow morning. I've arranged everything. But, Jeremy, there's something else you need to know." I looked up. "Vincent didn't just leave you a connection to Sophie. He left you half of everything he kept separate from the family business. Properties, investments, accounts held under private trusts that Victoria and your cousins know nothing about. It's worth approximately $60 million. The world stopped. He wanted Sophie to have the other half, and he wanted you to be the one to tell her. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Pascal stood and faced me. "You have a choice, Jeremy. You can walk away, let the secondary clause take effect, and let your cousins absorb everything. Or you can step into the life Vincent wanted for you, a life he couldn't have for himself." I looked down at the photograph one more time, at Vincent and Isabelle frozen in a moment of happiness that had been stolen from them. I thought about the drawing room, about Bryce's laughter, about the envelope they had mocked, and then I thought about Vincent's final words. "You've received everything." He wasn't talking about money. He was talking about truth. I stood up, tucked the photograph into my jacket pocket, and met Pascal's eyes. "Tell me where to find her."
Pascal handed me a slip of paper with an address written in elegant script. "Sophie lives in Fontvieille, the quieter side of Monaco. She's expecting you at 10 tomorrow morning. I've told her only that you're Vincent's grandson and that he wanted you to meet." I folded the paper carefully. "Does she know about the inheritance?" "Not yet. Vincent left specific instructions. He wanted you to tell her in person, to see her reaction, to understand who she is before the money complicated things." Pascal walked back to his desk and retrieved another envelope, this one sealed with the same crimson wax as the first. "This contains the full details of the trust, Account numbers, property deeds, everything. Vincent wanted you to review it tonight before you meet Sophie. I took the envelope, feeling its weight. What if she doesn't believe me? She will. I'll be there as legal witness to confirm everything. But, Jeremy, I need to warn you about something. Pascal's expression grew serious. Your Aunt Victoria is not a fool. By now she's realized you left the country. She'll be looking for you. How would she even know where to look? Because 3 days ago, she contacted my office asking about Vincent's offshore holdings. I told her I couldn't discuss client matters, but she's persistent. If she discovers you're in Monaco, she'll come, and she won't come alone. A chill ran down my spine. What do you think she knows? I think she's suspected for years that Vincent had secrets. She's probably been waiting for him to die so she could start digging. Your sudden trip to Monaco will confirm her suspicions. The 72-hour window isn't just about logistics, Jeremy. It's about getting everything legally transferred before they can interfere. Once Sophie signs the acceptance documents tomorrow, the trust becomes irrevocable. Until then, it's vulnerable. I nodded slowly. What should I do? Stay alert. Don't use your credit cards more than necessary. Don't post anything on social media. And whatever you do, don't tell anyone outside this room where Sophie lives. I left Pascal's office an hour later with the sealed envelope burning a hole in my jacket pocket. Monaco felt different now, less like a playground for the wealthy and more like a chessboard where I was just learning the rules. I checked into a small hotel near the harbor, paid cash, and locked the door behind me. Then I sat on the bed and opened the second envelope. Inside were documents that made my head spin. Account statements from banks in Luxembourg, Switzerland, and Singapore, property deeds for a villa in Nice, an apartment in Paris, a cottage in the Scottish Highlands. Investment portfolios tracking stocks, bonds, and private equity holdings spanning 3 decades. At the bottom of the stack was a handwritten letter from Vincent, dated 6 months before his death. Jeremy, if you're reading this, then Pascal has done his job and you've made it to Monaco. I'm proud of you for coming. I know this must all seem overwhelming, perhaps even impossible to believe. But everything in this envelope is real, and it's yours. Half of it, anyway. I spent my life building an empire for a family that never appreciated what it took to create it. Victoria sees only dollar signs. Your cousins see only what they're owed. But you, Jeremy, you're different. You remind me of who I was before I let fear and obligation dictate my choices. When I met Isabel, I was free. I was myself. And when I left her, I buried that part of me so deep I almost forgot it existed. Sophie is the living proof that some things can't be buried. She deserves to know her father's family, and you deserve to know that you're not alone. The money is secondary. I'm giving it to you because I trust you'll do something meaningful with it, something that honors the life I should have lived. But more than that, I'm giving you a sister, or rather, an aunt. Family is supposed to be more than blood and balance sheets. It's supposed to be chosen. Choose wisely, Jeremy, and don't let them take this from you. I read the letter 3 times, each time feeling the weight of Vincent's regret pressing against my chest. He'd spent 50 years living a lie, maintaining an image, playing a role. And in the end, he'd entrusted me with the truth. I fell asleep with the documents spread across the bed, my phone on silent, the door double-locked. Then at 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed. I jolted awake, heart pounding. A text message from an unknown number. Jeremy, it's Bryce. We know you're in Monaco. Victoria is on her way. Whatever game you're playing ends now. Call me.
Then I remembered. The flight. I'd booked it on my personal credit card. I cursed under my breath and immediately texted Pascal. They know I'm here. Bryce just contacted me. What do I do? His response came within minutes. Stay calm. Meet Sophie as planned. I'm moving up the signing to 10 a.m. sharp. Once it's done, they can't touch it. Do not engage with them. I didn't sleep after that. I sat by the window, watching the dark harbor, waiting for dawn. At 9:30, I took a cab to Fontvale. The address Pascal had given me led to a charming 4-story building with flower boxes in every window. I pressed the buzzer for apartment 3B. Oui? A woman's voice, soft, slightly cautious. Jeremy Walters, Pascal Dubois sent me. A pause. Then the door buzzed open. I climbed the narrow staircase, my heart hammering. On the 3rd floor, a door stood ajar. I knocked gently and pushed it open. The apartment was filled with light. Tall windows overlooked a small garden, and every wall was covered with paintings, some finished, some half done, propped on easels or leaning against furniture. The smell of oil paint and turpentine hung in the air. And there, standing by the window with a paintbrush in her hand, was Sophie. She looked exactly like the photograph. Older, yes, with silver streaking through her dark hair, but the same eyes, the same graceful posture. And when she turned to face me, I saw it immediately. She had Vincent's eyes. The same deep-set gray-blue, the same intensity. "Jeremy," she said, setting down her brush. "Pascal told me you'd be coming, but he didn't tell me why." I swallowed hard. "It's about Vincent, about your father." Her expression shifted, guarded but curious. "I haven't heard that name in years. Not out loud, anyway." "He passed away 2 weeks ago." She nodded slowly. "I know. I saw the obituary online. I thought about attending the funeral, but I didn't think his family would appreciate a ghost showing up." "You're not a ghost," I said quietly. "You're his daughter." "His secret daughter," she corrected, a hint of bitterness in her voice. "The one he supported from a distance but never acknowledged. I'm grateful for what he did, don't misunderstand, but it's hard not to feel like I was something he was ashamed of." He wasn't ashamed. He was scared and full of regret. Sophie studied me for a long moment. "Why are you here, Jeremy?" I reached into my jacket and pulled out the photograph, the one of Vincent and Isabel. I handed it to her. Her breath caught. She took the photograph with trembling hands, staring at it like it was a window into another life. "Where did you get this?" "Vincent left it for me, along with a letter from your mother, and something else." I explained everything. The will reading, the envelope, Pascal, the trust. With every word, Sophie's eyes grew wider. When she finished, she sank into a chair, still holding the photograph. $60 million, she whispered. "Half for you, half for me." "Yes." "Why?" "Because he wanted to make things right. Or as right as he could." She looked up at me, tears pooling in her eyes. "I don't need his money, Jeremy. I've built a life here. I have my art, my friends, my peace. Money won't change the fact that he chose his other family over me. He didn't choose them. He was trapped by them. There's a difference." A knock at the door interrupted us. Pascal stepped inside, briefcase in hand. "I hope I'm not intruding, but we're running out of time. The documents need to be signed within an hour." Sophie wiped her eyes. "What happens if I don't sign?" "Then the trust defaults to Victoria and her children. Everything Vincent set aside for you and Jeremy will be absorbed into the family estate." Sophie looked at me. "Is that what you want?"
"I want you to have what's yours," I said. "Vincent made his choice. Now we get to make ours." She stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the garden for a long moment. Then she turned back to us. "All right, I'll sign." Pascal opened his briefcase and began laying out documents on the dining table. As Sophie read through them, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, frowned, and silenced it. "Everything all right?" I asked. Just a strange number, probably a telemarketer. But something in her tone made me uneasy. I pulled out my own phone and saw 3 missed calls from Bryce, 2 from Victoria, and a voicemail. I played the voicemail on speaker. Victoria's voice filled the room, cold and sharp. "Jeremy, I'm standing outside your hotel. You're not here, which means you're with her, Sophie Laurent. Yes, we know about her. We've always known. If you think you can steal what belongs to this family and give it to some illegitimate bastard your grandfather knocked up in the 70s, you're more delusional than I thought. Sign nothing. We're coming." The voicemail ended. Sophie's face had gone pale. They know where I live? Pascal's jaw tightened. They must have followed Jeremy from my office or tracked his phone. We need to finish this now. He thrust a pen into Sophie's hand. "Sign here, here, and here, quickly." Sophie's hand shook as she signed the first document, then the second. But before she could sign the third, someone pounded on the apartment door. "Sophie Laurent, open this door." Victoria's voice, muffled but unmistakable. "I know you're in there, and I know what you're trying to do." Pascal grabbed the documents. "Keep signing, I'll handle this." But before he could reach the door, it burst open. Victoria stood in the doorway, flanked by Bryce and Cooper. Behind them was a man in a suit I didn't recognize, probably a lawyer. "This stops now," Victoria said, stepping inside without invitation. Her eyes swept the room and landed on the documents spread across the table. "Those papers are fraudulent. Vincent was not of sound mind when he created that trust. We have medical records proving he was suffering from dementia." "That's a lie," I said, standing up. "Vincent was sharp until the day he died." "Says you?" Bryce sneered, pushing past his mother. "Face it, cousin, you're out of your depth. This is grown-up business." Sophie stood frozen, pen still in her hand, the final document unsigned. Pascal stepped between them and the table. "You have no legal authority here. This is Monaco, not the United States, and these documents are protected under international estate law." Victoria's lawyer spoke up. "We've already filed an injunction with the Monaco courts citing fraudulent inheritance claims. If Miss Laurent signs that document, she'll be committing a felony." Sophie looked at me, terrified. "Is that true?" "No," Pascal said firmly. "They're bluffing. Sign the paper, Sophie." "Sign it and you'll be arrested," Victoria said coldly. "Is that what you want? To go to prison over money that was never meant for you?" Sophie's hand trembled. The pen slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. And in that moment, I realized Victoria had won. The room felt like it had run out of oxygen. Sophie stood frozen, staring at the pen on the floor like it was a live grenade. Victoria's lawyer stepped forward, a slim man with wire-rimmed glasses and a predatory smile that made my skin crawl. "Miss Laurent," he said smoothly, "I represent the Thornfield Trust family. I strongly advise you not to sign any documents until this matter has been properly reviewed by the courts. Doing so could expose you to significant legal liability." Sophie looked at Pascal, her eyes pleading. "Is he telling the truth?" "No," Pascal said firmly. "They're bluffing. Sign the paper, Sophie." "Sign it and you'll be arrested," Victoria said coldly. "Is that what you want? To go to prison over money that was never meant for you?" Sophie's hand trembled. The pen slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. And in that moment, I realized Victoria had won. The room felt like it had run out of oxygen. Sophie stood frozen, staring at the pen on the floor like it was a live grenade. Victoria's lawyer stepped forward, a slim man with wire-rimmed glasses and a predatory smile that made my skin crawl. "Miss Laurent, I represent the Thornfield Trust. I strongly advise you not to sign any documents until this matter has been properly reviewed by the courts. Doing so could expose you to significant legal liability." Sophie looked at Pascal, her eyes pleading. "Is he telling the truth?"
No, Pascal said firmly. They're bluffing. Sign the paper, Sophie. Sign it and you'll be arrested, Victoria said coldly. Is that what you want? To go to prison over money that was never meant for you?
That's garbage, I said, my voice rising. Vincent was completely lucid. I spoke with him 6 months before he died. He knew exactly what he was doing. Bryce laughed, a short, ugly sound. You spoke with him once in 6 months, and you think that makes you an expert on his mental state? We lived with him. We saw him every day. We watched him deteriorate. You watched him because you were circling like vultures, I shot back, waiting for him to die so you could split up his money. Cooper, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. You're projecting, Jeremy. You're the one who disappeared for 15 years and suddenly showed up the moment there was money involved. I showed up because he asked me to. Convenient, Kendall said, leaning against the doorframe. She'd been quiet too, watching everything with those sharp, calculating eyes. You show up, get handed a mysterious envelope, fly to Monaco, and suddenly there's a secret daughter and $60 million nobody knew about. You don't think that looks suspicious? It looks like Vincent planned it that way, Sophie said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She'd picked up the pen again, holding it like a talisman. He wanted Jeremy to find me. He wanted us to have this. Victoria's expression softened, but it was the kind of softness that comes before a knife. Sophie, dear, I understand this must be overwhelming. Vincent was a complicated man, and clearly he cared about you in his own way. But this trust, if it even exists legally, represents assets that belong to the Thornfield family, assets that my father built over decades, assets that my children are entitled to inherit. You've lived your whole life without it. Why start a war now? Because it's mine, Sophie said, her voice stronger now. He left it to me, to us. He was sick, Victoria said firmly. He wasn't thinking clearly, and Jeremy, whether intentionally or not, is taking advantage of that. I stepped toward Victoria, anger burning in my chest. How about the fact that you knew about Sophie all along and never told anyone? You just admitted it in your voicemail. You've always known. Victoria's mask slipped for just a second, a flicker of something cold and reptilian crossing her face. Then it was gone, replaced with wounded indignation. I knew Vincent had made mistakes in his youth. I knew he'd supported a woman in Monaco, but I respected his privacy. I didn't realize he'd been planning to rob his legitimate family to support his illegitimate one. Legitimate, Sophie repeated, her voice hollow. Is that what I am? Illegitimate? By definition, yes. I'm sorry, but that's the legal reality. You have no claim to the Thornfield name or assets. She has what Vincent chose to give her, Pascal said, stepping forward again. And your injunction won't change that. At best, you've delayed the transfer by a few days. The trust is still valid. Then we'll see you in court, Victoria's lawyer said, snapping his briefcase shut. Miss Laurent, Mr. Walters, I'll be filing a full forensic review of Vincent Thornfield's medical records, financial transactions, and communications for the past 5 years. If there's any evidence of coercion, fraud, or exploitation of a vulnerable adult, you'll both be facing criminal charges. Sophie's face went white. Criminal charges? He's bluffing, I said, but my voice lacked confidence. Am I? The lawyer smiled. Elder abuse is a serious crime in Monaco, France, and the United States. If we can prove that Vincent was manipulated into creating this trust, everyone involved becomes liable. That includes you, Mr. Dubois. Pascal didn't flinch. I've done nothing illegal. Then you won't mind a full audit of your firm's handling of Vincent's offshore accounts. I'm sure the financial authorities will be very interested in reviewing your records. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Pascal's reputation, his entire career, was being put on the line. Victoria gathered her coat. Jeremy, you have until tomorrow morning to withdraw your claim. If you do, we'll forget this ever happened. You can walk away with your dignity intact. If you don't, we'll bury you and her. She looked at Sophie when she said it,
and the contempt in her eyes was unmistakable. Then she turned and walked out, her lawyer and my cousins following like a royal procession. The door closed behind them, and the silence they left behind was suffocating. Sophie sank into her chair, her face in her hands. I can't do this. I can't fight them. I don't have the money for lawyers. I don't have the energy for a court battle. I just want to paint. I just want my life back.
Sophie, I started, but she cut me off. No, they're right. I've lived without Vincent's money my whole life. I don't need it now. Let them have it. They don't deserve it, I said. Neither do I, she whispered. I'm nobody. I'm the mistake he made before he knew better. They're his real family. You're his real family. I'm just the ghost. I knelt beside her chair. That's not true. Vincent chose you. He could have left everything to them, but he didn't. Doesn't that tell you something? She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. It tells me he felt guilty. Guilt isn't the same as love. Pascal was on his phone, pacing near the window. When he hung up, he looked grim. The injunction is real. It freezes the trust's assets pending a court review. That review could take weeks, possibly months, and during that time, Victoria's team will be digging into everything. Can we fight it? I asked. Yes, but it will be expensive, time-consuming, and very public. Every detail of Vincent's life, Sophie's life, and your life will be scrutinized. The media will turn it into a circus. He looked at Sophie. Are you prepared for that? She shook her head. No, I'm not. Then they've won, Pascal said quietly. Without Sophie's signature, the trust defaults to the secondary clause. Victoria and your cousins will absorb everything within 90 days. I stood up, frustration boiling over. There has to be another way. There isn't, Pascal said. Not legally. Vincent's instructions were clear. Both beneficiaries had to sign within 72 hours. We're out of time. I pulled out my phone and checked the timestamp on Victoria's voicemail. Played it again. If you think you can steal what belongs to this family and give it to some illegitimate bastard your grandfather knocked up in the 70s, you're more delusional than I thought. Something clicked in my mind. She admitted it, I said slowly. She admitted she's always known about Sophie. Pascal looked up. What? In the voicemail. She said, we've always known. If they've known about Sophie for years, possibly decades, then why didn't they ever challenge Vincent's support of her? Why wait until now? Pascal's eyes widened. Because they were waiting for him to die. If they'd challenged it while he was alive, he could have changed his will to explicitly include Sophie. By waiting, they thought they could erase her from the narrative entirely. And that means, I said, feeling a surge of hope, that Victoria knew Vincent was of sound mind when he created the trust. She can't claim he was incompetent if she knew about Sophie and did nothing to stop him from supporting her. Pascal grabbed his phone again. That's leverage. If I can prove Victoria knew about the trust, or at least suspected it, then her claim of incompetence falls apart. The injunction becomes meaningless. How do we prove it? Sophie asked. I held up my phone. We already have. She said it herself. Pascal smiled for the first time since Victoria had barged in. Jeremy, you might have just saved this entire case. But even as he said it, my phone buzzed with another message, this time from an unknown number. Nice try, cousin, but recordings obtained without consent aren't admissible in Monaco courts. See you tomorrow. Victoria. My blood turned to ice. She'd known I was recording. She'd said it on purpose, knowing it couldn't be used against her. And just like that, the hope died. That night, I couldn't stay in Sophie's apartment. The walls felt too close, the air too heavy with defeat.
I told her and Pascal I needed to clear my head, and I walked out into the Monaco night without a destination in mind. The city was alive with lights, laughter spilling from restaurants and casinos, yachts bobbing gently in the harbor. It was a playground for people who'd never had to fight for anything, who'd never felt the crushing weight of being erased. I found myself at the harbor, sitting on a bench facing the water. My phone buzzed constantly. Messages from Bryce, from Kendall, even one from Cooper that just said, "It's not too late to do the right thing." The right thing. As if they had any concept of what that meant. I thought about Vincent, about the life he'd lived, the choices he'd made. He'd walked away from Isabel, from Sophie, from the person he really was, all because he'd been too afraid to stand up to his family. And 50 years later, he was trying to fix it from beyond the grave. But maybe some things couldn't be fixed. Maybe the damage was too deep, the wounds too old. My phone rang. I almost ignored it, but the caller ID showed Pascal's name. "Jeremy, where are you?" "The harbor." "Why?" "You need to come back to Sophie's apartment, now. I found something." 20 minutes later, I was climbing the stairs to apartment 3B again. Pascal opened the door before I could knock, his face flushed with excitement. "What is it?" I asked. He led me to the dining table where he'd spread out a series of documents. Sophie sat beside them, looking equally confused and hopeful. "After you left, I went back through Vincent's files, everything he'd left in my care over the years. I was looking for anything that might prove Victoria's knowledge of the trust, and I found this." He handed me a letter, old and yellowed, dated 30 years ago. It was addressed to Pascal, written in Vincent's handwriting. "Pascal, I'm writing this as a precaution. Victoria has been asking questions about my offshore accounts, about property I own that isn't listed in the family portfolio. She's suspicious, and rightly so. I've been careful, but she's clever. If anything happens to me, if she tries to claim I was incompetent or manipulated, I want you to know the truth. I am of completely sound mind. Every decision I've made regarding Sophie and Jeremy has been deliberate and carefully considered. This is not senility. This is choice. Keep this letter safe. It may be the only thing that protects them when I'm gone." I read it 3 times, my hands shaking. This proves he was lucid. "It proves more than that," Pascal said. "It proves he anticipated Victoria's exact strategy 30 years ago. He knew she'd try to claim incompetence. He wrote this specifically to counter that argument." "Will it hold up in court?" Sophie asked. "It's a contemporaneous statement of mental capacity, witnessed and notarized. In Monaco law, that carries significant weight. Combined with medical records showing no cognitive decline until the final weeks of his life, it dismantles their entire case." I felt hope rising again. Fragile, but real. "So we can fight the injunction?" "We can do more than that," Pascal said. "We can file a countersuit for defamation and harassment. Victoria's voicemail, her threats, her lawyer's intimidation tactics, all of it becomes evidence of malicious intent." I looked at Pascal. "You're saying we go on offense?" "I'm saying we show the court exactly who Victoria Thornfield is, not the grieving daughter protecting her father's legacy, but a bully trying to steal what doesn't belong to her." For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw fire in Sophie's eyes. "What do we need to do?" Pascal pulled out his laptop. "We need to file an emergency motion to dissolve the injunction, supported by Vincent's letter and a full timeline of Victoria's knowledge of your existence. We need medical records proving Vincent's competence, and we need testimony." "From who?" I asked. from anyone who interacted with Vincent in his final years. Friends, business associates, household staff, people who can confirm he was sharp, deliberate, and in control of his faculties. I thought about the will reading, about the way Vincent's letter had been so specific, so detailed. What about his lawyer, Carver? He read the will. He'd have to know if Vincent was incompetent. Pascal's eyes lit up. Edmund Carver, yes. He's been Vincent's attorney for decades. If anyone can testify to his mental state, it's him. Will he do it? Sophie asked. He'll have to, Pascal said. He has a professional obligation to uphold Vincent's true wishes. If we subpoena him, he'll have no choice. I stood up, pacing now too. How long will this take? If we file tonight, we can get an emergency hearing within 48 hours. But Jeremy, you need to understand something. Once we do this, there's no going back. Victoria will come at us with everything she has. It will get ugly. It's already ugly, I said. Sophie nodded. Do it. Pascal started typing, his fingers flying across the keyboard. I'll need statements from both of you. Every interaction you had with Vincent, every conversation, every detail you can remember. And Jeremy, that voicemail from Victoria, forward it to me. We may not be able to use it as proof of her knowledge, but we can absolutely use it to show her character. I forwarded the voicemail. Then I sat down and started writing. Every memory of Vincent, every moment we'd shared, every word he'd spoken. I wrote about the way he'd looked at me during our last conversation, the clarity in his eyes, the strength in his voice. I wrote about the letter he'd left, the cassette tape, the careful planning that had gone into every step of this process. Hours passed. Coffee turned cold. The Monaco night deepened outside the windows. Finally, around 3 in the morning, Pascal leaned back in his chair. It's done. I'm filing it now. He hit a button, and I watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. When it reached 100%, he closed the laptop and looked at us. Now we wait. I didn't go back to my hotel that night. I slept on Sophie's couch, fully clothed, my phone on the coffee table beside me. Every sound made me jolt awake, expecting Victoria to come bursting through the door again. But she didn't come. At 8 in the morning, Pascal's phone rang. He answered it, listened for a moment, then smiled. Thank you, Your Honor. We'll be there. He hung up and looked at us. Emergency hearing scheduled for 2 o'clock this afternoon. Judge Marcel Fontaine, one of the most respected jurists in Monaco. And here's the interesting part. Victoria's lawyer tried to get the hearing delayed. The judge refused. That's good, right? Sophie asked. That's very good. It means the judge saw merit in our filing. He wants to hear our side. At 1:30, we walked into the Monaco courthouse, a beautiful old building with marble floors and vaulted ceilings. Victoria was already there, flanked by her lawyer and all 3 of my cousins. When she saw us, her expression could have frozen the Mediterranean. We took our seats on opposite sides of the courtroom. The judge entered, an older man with white hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once.
This is an emergency motion to dissolve a temporary injunction, he began in accented English. Mr. Dubois, you represent the respondents. Please present your case. Pascal stood. Your Honor, my clients are the rightful beneficiaries of a trust established by Vincent Thornfield 30 years ago. The petitioners, led by Miss Victoria Thornfield, are attempting to invalidate that trust on the grounds of mental incompetence. However, we have contemporaneous evidence that Mr. Thornfield was not only competent but anticipated this exact challenge decades in advance. He presented Vincent's letter. The judge read it carefully, his expression unreadable. Victoria's lawyer stood. Your Honor, this letter is self-serving and doesn't prove— I'll determine what it proves, the judge said curtly. Continue, Mr. Dubois. Pascal presented medical records, testimony from Edmund Carver, who'd agreed to appear via video link, and a timeline of Vincent's careful planning. With each piece of evidence, I watched Victoria's confidence erode.
Finally, Pascal played the voicemail. Victoria's voice filled the courtroom, dripping with venom and contempt. When it finished, the judge looked at Victoria. "Miss Thornfield, this recording suggests you've known about Ms. Laurent's existence for quite some time. Is that correct?" Victoria hesitated. "I was aware my father had supported someone in Monaco, yes." "And you never challenged it?" "It wasn't my place to challenge how my father spent his money while he was alive." "But it's your place now that he's dead?" Silence. The judge leaned back. "It seems to me, Miss Thornfield, that your father made his wishes quite clear. He established a trust, documented his reasoning, and took extensive precautions to ensure it would be honored after his death. The fact that you disagree with his choices does not constitute grounds for invalidation." He picked up his gavel. "Motion granted. The injunction is dissolved. The trust stands. Miss Laurent and Mr. Walters are the rightful beneficiaries, and any further attempts to interfere will be viewed as harassment." He picked up his gavel. The gavel came down, and just like that, we'd won. The gavel's echo still rang in my ears as we left the courthouse. Sophie walked beside me, her hand gripping mine so tightly I could feel her pulse racing. Pascal led us through a side exit to avoid the reporters already gathering at the front steps. "We need to move quickly," Pascal said, checking his watch. "The judge's ruling dissolves the injunction, but we still need to complete the asset transfer before Victoria finds another angle to delay. She's not the type to accept defeat gracefully." We drove to Pascal's office in silence. The weight of what had just happened was beginning to sink in. $60 million, properties across Europe, a life neither Sophie or I had ever imagined. Inside Pascal's office, he spread documents across his desk. "These need to be signed, notarized, and filed with 3 different banks by close of business today. After that, the transfers become irreversible." Sophie picked up a pen, her hand steadier now than it had been yesterday. "Where do I sign?" For the next 2 hours, we signed page after page. Account authorizations, property transfers, trust amendments. My hand cramped, but I didn't stop. Each signature felt like another lock clicking into place, another barrier between us and Victoria's grasping hands. At 4:30, Pascal's assistant brought in the final notarized documents. "It's done," Pascal said, leaning back in his chair with visible relief. "As of this moment, you're both significantly wealthier than you were this morning." I didn't feel wealthy. I felt exhausted. Sophie looked at the documents, then at me. "What do we do now?" "Now," Pascal said, "you decide what kind of life you want to build with what Vincent left you, but I'd suggest doing it somewhere other than Monaco for the next few weeks. Victoria knows where you live, Sophie, and I suspect she's not finished trying to make your lives difficult." He was right. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon with calls from blocked numbers, messages from people I didn't know, asking for comments, offering legal services, fishing for information. "I have a cottage in the Scottish Highlands. It's remote, private, and available. You're welcome to stay there until things settle down." Sophie and I exchanged glances. "Thank you," she said, "but I think I need to go home, to my real home, face whatever comes next." I understood. Running felt wrong, like admitting we'd done something shameful. We left Pascal's office just as the sun was setting over Monaco. The city looked different now, less intimidating, as if Vincent's final gift had somehow shifted the balance of power. But as we walked to Sophie's apartment, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street. Tinted windows, engine running. "Don't look," I said quietly to Sophie, "but I think we're being followed." She tensed but kept walking. "Victoria?" "Probably, or someone she hired." We reached her building and I glanced back. The sedan was still there, idling, waiting. Inside her apartment, Sophie locked the door and pulled the curtains. "This is insane. What does she want?" "To scare us, to make us feel like we're not safe." My phone buzzed, another unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Jeremy," Victoria's voice, cold and controlled. Congratulations on your courthouse performance. Very moving. But you should know something. That trust may be legal, but that doesn't mean you've won." The judge said, "I don't care what the judge said. You've taken something that belonged to my family, and I will spend every remaining day of my life making sure you regret it. You and that woman. Her name is Sophie, and she's family too, your family. She's nothing, and neither are you. Vincent made a mistake. I'm simply correcting it." The line went dead. I looked at Sophie. We need to leave Monaco. Tonight. We didn't go to Scotland. Instead, Sophie suggested something that surprised me. "Let's go public. Tell our story before Victoria can twist it into something ugly."
The next morning, we sat across from a journalist named Claire Beaumont, a freelancer who'd covered European wealth scandals for 20 years. Pascal had vouched for her integrity and, more importantly, her reach. When Claire published something, people paid attention. We met in a small cafe in Nice, far enough from Monaco to feel safe, but close enough that we could return quickly if needed. Claire set up a small recording device between us and leaned forward with the intensity of someone who knew she was sitting on a major story. "Let me make sure I understand," Claire said, reviewing her notes. "Vincent Thornfield, shipping magnate worth over $200 million, had a secret daughter in Monaco that his legitimate family knew about but never acknowledged. And before he died, he created a trust splitting $60 million between that daughter and his grandson, specifically excluding his daughter Victoria and her children." "That's correct," I said. "And Victoria is now claiming Vincent was mentally incompetent when he created the trust, despite evidence to the contrary." "Yes." Claire sat back. "This is extraordinary. Do you have documentation?" Pascal slid a folder across the table. Copies of everything. The trust documents, Vincent's letter establishing mental competency, medical records, court transcripts from yesterday's hearing. It's all there. Claire spent 20 minutes reading through the documents, occasionally glancing up at Sophie with something that looked like sympathy. Finally, she closed the folder. "I'll run this story, but I need to warn you about something. Once this goes public, your lives will change, permanently. The media will dig into everything, your history, your finances, your relationships. And Victoria Thornfield has resources and connections that will make her version of events very loud. Let her shout. The truth is louder." Claire smiled. "I like you. All right, let's start with the basics. Sophie, tell me about your mother." For the next 3 hours, Sophie talked. About Isabel, about growing up knowing her father existed but couldn't acknowledge her, about the quarterly deposits that appeared in her mother's account without explanation, about learning Vincent's identity only after Isabel died, and the strange, distant relationship they had maintained ever since. I talked about my own history with Vincent, the sporadic visits, the sense of being tolerated rather than welcomed by the rest of the family, the envelope that had changed everything. Claire recorded it all, asked probing questions, took notes in shorthand that looked like a secret language. When we finished, she turned off the recorder. "I'll have the article ready by tomorrow evening. It'll run simultaneously in 3 major European publications and 2 American ones. By Friday morning, everyone will know your story." "And Victoria's," I added. "Especially Victoria's," Claire confirmed. "I've already reached out to her for comment. She declined, but her lawyer sent me a cease and desist letter threatening legal action if I publish anything defamatory." "Is the truth defamatory?" Sophie asked. "Not in my experience," Claire said, "but it does tend to make powerful people very angry." We left the cafe and drove back to Monaco as the sun set. My phone started buzzing before we even crossed the border. Messages from journalists, from lawyers, from people claiming to be long-lost relatives suddenly interested in reconnecting. I ignored all of them except one. A text from Pascal. "Claire's article just dropped early. It's already trending. Brace yourselves." I opened the news app on my phone, and there it was. Top story. The Thornfield Secret. How a shipping magnate's hidden daughter exposed to family's greed.
The article was devastating. Claire had woven together every piece of evidence, every quote, every contradiction in Victoria's story. She had even included a photo of young Vincent and Isabel, the one from Pascal's office, with a caption that read, "The love Vincent Thornfield chose to hide." By the time we reached Sophie's apartment, the story had been shared thousands of times. Comments poured in, most of them supportive, some viciously attacking Victoria and my cousins. My phone rang. It was a reporter from the New York Times, then the BBC, then the CNN. Sophie's phone was ringing too. She stared at it like it had betrayed her. "I didn't think it would be this fast." "Welcome to the internet age," I said. But the call that mattered most came an hour later. Edmund Carver, Vincent's longtime lawyer. "Jeremy," he said, his voice grave, "I just read the article. I need you to know something. Victoria is planning a press conference tomorrow morning. She's going to claim you and Sophie manipulated a dying man and that the courts in Monaco are corrupt. She's going to try to destroy your credibility." "Let her try," I said. "She will do more than try. She's retained a crisis management firm and they're very good at what they do. By tomorrow afternoon, half the internet will believe you're a con artist." I felt my stomach drop. "What should we do?" "Beat her to it," Carver said. "Hold your own press conference, tonight if possible. Control the narrative before she can poison it." I looked at Sophie. She'd heard every word. She nodded. "We'll do it," I said. "Good. I'll be there to support you. It's what Vincent would have wanted." 2 hours later, we stood in front of a dozen cameras set up in Pascal's office. Reporters crammed into every available space, their questions already flying before we'd even begun. I stepped up to the microphone, Sophie beside me, Pascal and Edmund Carver flanking us like bookends. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "My name is Jeremy Walters, and this is Sophie Laurent. We're here to tell you about Vincent Thornfield, not the man his family wants you to remember, but the man he actually was." And then, with the world watching, we told the truth. The press conference lasted 40 minutes. We showed documents, played recordings, and answered every question thrown at us. By the time we finished, the room was silent except for the clicking of camera shutters. The next morning, Victoria's planned press conference was canceled. Her crisis management team had seen our presentation and advised her that fighting publicly would only make things worse. Instead, she released a brief statement through her lawyer. "The Thornfield family respects the court's decision and wishes to move forward privately." It was the closest thing to surrender we'd ever get from her. 3 days later, Pascal called with news. Victoria's lawyer reached out. They want to settle. She's willing to drop all challenges to the trust in exchange for you and Sophie agreeing not to pursue defamation claims against her. Sophie and I discussed it for less than 5 minutes. "We accept," I told Pascal. "We're not interested in revenge. We just want this to be over." The settlement was finalized within a week. Victoria withdrew all legal challenges, and in return, we agreed to a mutual non-disparagement clause. The trust was officially ours, irrevocable and complete. Edmund Carver called one final time. "Vincent would be proud of you both," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "He knew his family would fight this, but he believed you were strong enough to win. He was right." After we hung up, Sophie and I sat in her apartment surrounded by documents that represented our new reality. $60 million, properties across Europe, a future neither of us had imagined. "What do we do now?" Sophie asked. I thought about Vincent, about the choices he made and the regrets he carried. We lived the life he couldn't. We choose love over obligation, truth over appearance. We honor him by being free. Sophie smiled, really smiled, for the first time since this all began. I'd like that.
6 months later, I stood in the garage of Vincent's cottage in the Scottish Highlands. Sophie had decided to keep it, and I'd helped her move in the previous week. The place was exactly as Pascal had described, remote, peaceful, surrounded by mountains and silence. Inside the garage, covered by a dusty tarp, was Vincent's old car,
A 1967 Jaguar E-Type, British racing green, immaculate despite decades of storage. I pulled back the tarp slowly, revealing the gleaming chrome and leather interior. On the passenger seat was an envelope I hadn't noticed before. My name, written in Vincent's handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single photograph. Vincent and Isabel, young and happy, standing beside this very car. On the back, he'd written, "Some roads are worth taking, even if they lead you away from where you're supposed to be. Drive it well, Jeremy. Live freely." I sat in the driver's seat, running my hands over the steering wheel where Vincent's hands had once rested. Through the garage window, I could see Sophie in the garden, painting on a canvas, finally at peace. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. My stomach tightened, expecting another threat from Victoria. But it wasn't from her. It was a lawyer in Montana, stating that Vincent had one final asset to transfer, something he'd kept separate from everything else, something that required my presence in person. I stared at the message, then at the photograph in my lap. Even in death, Vincent was still leaving breadcrumbs, still guiding me towards something I couldn't yet see. I started the Jaguar's engine. It roared to life, powerful and eager after years of silence. Some journeys, I realized, never really end. They just lead you to the next beginning. And I was finally ready to see where this one would take me. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.